Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I hope everyone is doing great today. My name is Valentina Kova, and I am the Communications Manager at Ontario One Call. Thank you so much for joining us today for our quarterly compliance and industry performance webinar. Today, we will hear from several fantastic speakers about navigating the recent changes to the Act and how they affect you. While we'll wait for a few more minutes to let everyone join us, I would like to let everyone know that we are recording this meeting and it will be available on our YouTube channel and on our website in the next couple of days. Also, you're welcome to send us your questions at any point during the presentation. You can use the Q&A button at the top of your screen. We will address questions at the end of the presentation. And in case we get more questions that the time allows, or if they are very specific scenario-based, please feel free to get in touch with our compliance team at CAIP, C-A-I-P, at OntarioOneCall.ca. We won't be able to answer specific scenario-based questions during the webinar because every situation is different and it may only affect a small group of people. But please do submit them via email. We have a wonderful CAIP team and they will be happy to answer all your questions. Without further ado, I will welcome our first presenter and panelist, Ryan McAfee, our Director of Compliance and Industry Performance. The floor is yours, Ryan.
Well, good morning, Valentina. Thank you for the introduction and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining our quarterly webinar. As usual, we have a packed agenda for today. And just to reiterate what Valentina had just mentioned is that, as always, we'll be wrapping our time together with a Q&A session right at the end of the webinar today. So I want to say thank you to those of you who have already taken the time to provide some questions ahead of time. The Q&A will be hosted by Soleil Howe, one of our wonderful compliance administrators. And Soleil will be hosting the Q&A session. So if you didn't have a chance to provide your questions ahead of time, not to worry. Soleil will be responding to questions throughout the webinar and preparing a list to put to the panel. And Soleil is going to be supported by a few others. So we have a lot of support on the call today. Okay. In terms of our agenda, so we'll be kicking off today's meeting. We'll be joined by Corey Officer, who is the Supervisor of Compliance and Industry Performance, or CAIP. Corey's going to be providing an update and insights on complaints data, as well as a few other important compliance issues. Next, we'll be joined, next is me. So I'll be providing an update on the compliance support pilot. It'll be our first time discussing this in about a year's time. We first brought you this pilot, or mentioned this pilot last summer. Now, there's a lot of work that's been done by our volunteer participants over the last year, so it'll be an interesting update for sure. We'll then be joined by Sarah Burke, Ontario One Call's Training and Education Program Coordinator, to provide updates on the regulatory changes that have unfolded over the past several months. There have been many, so we want to take some time to review those with you. Sarah will also be hosting an interactive session to test your knowledge. We'd like your feedback on this approach. If it's helpful, we're happy to do it again. And hot off the presses, we'll be joined by Ian Simpson, Ontario One Call's Director of Communications and Marketing, to tell us about some of the changes to our governance that are happening happening soon. For those of you on the call, you'll remember that Ian Simpson is no stranger to compliance here at Ontario One Call, and certainly not to webinars. So we're very lucky to have Ian joining us right before the Q&A. So with that, I'll bring up the compliance update and invite Corey Officer to join. Good afternoon, Corey. Or good morning, Corey.
Good morning. Sorry, Valentina, my camera's not in there. There we go. Hello, everyone. So thank you, Ryan. Much appreciated. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today for our quarterly webinar. Today, I will be providing an update on developments since our last quarterly webinar. present some complaint data, and discuss recent complaints regarding designated broadband projects and renegotiated dates for locate requests. Next slide, please, Ryan. Thank you. So over the last 3 months, we have observed several significant changes worth highlighting. When comparing this year's complaint data to previous years, we are seeing a notable decrease in the number of complaints. This observation goes hand in hand with continued improvement in locate delivery performance by underground infrastructure owners. According to April data, excavators are now receiving their complete locate packages within 5 business days or less, 83% of the time, which is a significant improvement compared to previous years. Additionally, the majority of underground infrastructure owners we contact through formal complaints appear to be resolving the issues quite promptly within 1 or 2 days. And lastly, on May 1st, 2024, the new timeline of 10 business days for specified locates for project work, also known as advanced locate requests, came into force. CAPE, along with many other great teams at Ontario One Call, have been working diligently with stakeholders to ensure a seamless transition to this new timeline. Next slide, please. So moving on to complaint data for May, the CAPE team issued a total of 123 formal complaints, with 106 being late locates. So the majority of the complaints that we received in May were related to single address requests. However, our preliminary data for June is showing a shift in this data, where we're seeing more complaints about advanced locate requests as it respects to late locates compared to single address. So as illustrated, our year-to-date complaint numbers have decreased by more than 50% comparing to 2022 and 2023. Next slide, please. So the CAPE team has received complaints regarding broadband projects governed by dedicated locator legislation that are being improperly submitted through the public stream. A designated broadband project is when a project owner has received MOI funding in full or in part to install high-speed internet infrastructure throughout Ontario. Any such broadband project where the funding execution date occurred on or after April 14th, 2022 must use the dedicated locator model through Ontario One Call. Before commencing the project owner and all affected infrastructure owners must agree in writing to the use of a dedicated locator service provider, also known as the DLSP. These locates must never go through the public stream. Ontario One Call considers improperly funneling DL locates through the public stream to be an abuse of the locate system. And then on my final slide, next slide, Ryan. Oh, you already did it, sorry. We have received numerous inquiries regarding the negotiation of locate requests. We have also observed high rates of renegotiation among certain underground infrastructure owners. So I thought this would be a great opportunity in this webinar to address this with the industry. So a renegotiation of a locate request occurs when an underground infrastructure owner contacts an excavator to propose a new due date to complete the locate request. This written offer must include the new proposed due date and the locate request number. The excavator has the discretion to accept or decline the renegotiation, and it is only valid once the acceptance is received in writing. Once accepted, the underground infrastructure owner should update 360 feedback or their LSP with the new due date. However, we have noticed instances where underground infrastructure owners or their locate service providers are changing the due date before receiving the excavator's acceptance in contravention of the Act. If invalid renegotiations occur and are brought to the CAPE team's attention, the due date will revert back to the original due date, which is either 5 or 10 business days from the receive date, depending on the type of request. So so single address or advance, doesn't matter. If the locate is completed after the original due date, it would be considered late and may be subject to administrative penalties. It's important to note that priority lists provided by excavators are not valid renegotiations. These lists indicate which locate requests should be prioritized, but do not constitute an agreement to a new due date. And then finally, renegotiations should not exceed 30 calendar days. Renegotiating a locate request beyond this period could contribute to ticket dumping. While there are scenarios where extended renegotiations may be reasonable, such as large projects with extensive dig areas, we ask that this be considered and considered carefully when renegotiating a locate request. So that concludes my portion of the webinar. Thank you for your time. I will hand it back to Ryan, who will update everybody on the compliance support program. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Corey. Really impressive complaint numbers. So really glad that we were able to share that with the sector. That's not something that everyone always has visibility to in absence of joining our webinars. So that was really good information to share. But I also wanted to, just before moving on to the next topic, sort of touch on the DL issue that you mentioned as well, Corey. And so I know that, DL requests flowing through the public stream, that's not a new issue. I've been hearing these concerns in my time at Ontario One Call about a year and a half now. So I'm glad that we're flagging today that when DL requests are improperly flowing through the public stream, that we do consider this to be a form of an abuse to the locate system. But I just wanted to talk about why that's important. And it's important because we view this as poor conduct, and this is the kind of conduct that that's captured by our risk matrix and impacts our enforcement decisions down the road. So please do bear in mind the feedback and the information that you're receiving today. Okay, compliance support program. So we first told you about the compliance support pilot program during a quarterly webinar last August, and we took a deep dive into compliance support at that time. So, as always, you're welcome to view that webinar on Ontario One Call's YouTube channel, as well as any other quarterly webinar that we've hosted. They're all there available for you to see. Now, compliance support is a partnership between Ontario One Call's member services teams as well as CAPE. Now, if adopted permanently, the compliance support program will act as a resource to support members, underground infrastructure owners with achieving compliance when it comes to performance and locate timeliness requirements. So the question is, why is it a pilot? Why not just adopt it full-time from the start? And well, testing our practices is an important part of Ontario One Call becoming a modern regulator as we grow and mature. My hope is that it will be useful, and my hope is that we can build off the successes of our regulatory partners, like in other DAAs. Like the Retirement Homes Regulatory Authority, as well as the TSSA and others who have compliance support programs. So we hope to build off of their successes. The UIOs who have volunteered to participate in compliance support are members from the telecommunications, gas, electricity, and municipal sectors of Ontario One Call's membership. They're all highly engaged infrastructure owners who have a great deal of knowledge to share and who are, frankly, willing to experiment with a few new interventions to learn what works, what doesn't, and perhaps what's promising in terms of improving locate timeliness. Now, at the outset of the program, volunteer UIOs submitted compliance plans to our Ontario One Call facilitators. These plans were very well contemplated and laid out steps and quarterly targets that volunteers would work to achieve over the course of about a year. So in terms of our volunteers, we have Peel Region, Kingston Utilities, Rogers, and two other underground infrastructure owners also joined the compliance support pilot and participate in the launch. Unfortunately, we did have one volunteer elect to withdraw from compliance support, which of course is their right. It was a voluntary program after all. So while we're disappointed to see them go, we understand that they had other priorities. Now, the schematic on the screen shows the first 9 of 14 stages of the compliance support pilot. We're here at step 9. That's currently where the program sits. That we're at the first quarterly check-in phase of the pilot. So we are working to meet with volunteers to check in to see how things are going. Now, once the pilot is over, we'll host another webinar to discuss the interventions that our partners experimented with, like building capacity in certain areas, training and education, improved communications and oversight. We will be presenting the results writ large and let you know what our volunteers found resulted in improved performance, and probably just as importantly, maybe what didn't work so well and is perhaps not worth investing in. Now, since we're just at the first quarterly check-in of the pilot, it's too soon to say what's the most promising, but stay tuned for a full debrief in 2025. All right, moving on to regulatory updates. So I'll welcome my colleague Sarah Burke to join this next section of our webinar on regulatory updates. So in this section, Sarah will take us through a type of specified locate in our legislation that you'll probably know better as advanced locates. Then we'll talk about the new prohibition against charging for locates, changes to the excavator recourse language in our legislation, and then, of course, administrative penalties, because I'm sure the sector is looking for an update on that. We'll then invite Ian Simpson to join us to talk about a few imminent changes to our governance. Welcome, Sarah. I'll be navigating, so please don't forget to tell me to move on to the next slide. Take it away.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it. We'll move to the next slide to start. Perfect. Okay, so so as we've sort of touched on through this entire webinar, there were regulatory changes earlier this year that changed the expected locate delivery timelines depending on the type of request that is submitted. So we're going to do a mini workshop today that will focus on the small changes that users will see in the web portal when submitting locate requests as it relates to new locate delivery timelines. So why is this in place? Well, stakeholder feedback collected in 2023 determined that underground infrastructure owners were not able to complete all types of locates within the required 5 business days as prescribed in the Ontario Underground Infrastructure Notification System Act. The ministry made this change to provide more flexibility to underground infrastructure owners when completing locates for large project areas or more complex excavation sites. Next slide, please, Ryan. So since May 1st of 2024, the timeframe allotted to underground infrastructure owners to respond to a locate request now depends on the type of request that is submitted. So those requests for work that will take place on only a single civic address will be allowed that 5 business day timeframe to be completed by underground infrastructure owners. And any requests submitted for excavations or dig sites comprised of more than 1 civic address, or those that do not have a civic address associated, will now be allowed a 10 business day timeframe. Next slide, please. So overall, the process of submitting locate requests has remained virtually unchanged. If you've enrolled previously in our professional locate administrator course, the skills that you've acquired through that learning will still apply. Excavators will still submit requests primarily online, exceptions of course being for emergency or priority requests. And you will still confirm your contact information the same, provide details related to your excavation like the dig depth, type of work, or your property type. And the changes are in place for just two aspects, which is your map selection and your work to begin date. Next slide, please. So as many of you are most likely aware, if you've submitted locate requests since May 1st, this is the first prompt that will appear after you select create a locate request. This is the absolute first step, and it does determine which locate delivery timeline you can expect once your request is submitted. There are specific criteria assigned to each type of request, and excavators need to be diligent to ensure they're selecting the correct type from the beginning. Each time you begin a new request, you will be reminded of this criteria. Next slide, please, Ryan. Oh, I think we can go back one. I think we jumped a bit. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so after you select a single address request, if that's what you're after, a second dialog box will appear to remind you of that criteria. Because the criteria for single address is very specific, you will always be reminded a second time to make sure that the work that you're submitting on this request does indeed match. Next slide, please, Ryan. Thank you. So when making a map selection for a single civic address, the system will let you know if the area you've selected might be too large to be processed as a 5-day locate. This also depends on the area that you're working in, so whether you're in an urban area or perhaps a rural or a sparse area, the criteria for what will alert you is different, but it is determined based on average property size for the area that you're working in. And if you select an area too large, you might be prompted to reduce the size of your map selection to better suit a single address request. Now, it's always been important to be precise with your map selection to best identify your work area, and this prompt will ensure that you're taking that additional step to narrow down your map selection. Next slide, please. So this will help the underground infrastructure owners or their locators to quickly provide you with a located area that best suits the needs of your excavation. And be sure to continue to include a detailed description of your work within your request and pre-mark your work area in the field. Now, if you've narrowed down your work area as much as you can, and you're still receiving the error message that your map selection is too large, you should consider submitting an advance request instead. You may be in an area where property sizes are above average, or maybe you're working on a commercial sized property. But if you get this prompt, you should go back and switch to an advance request instead. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so when submitting a single address request, the work to begin date will automatically populate to the 5 business day time frame. You will be unable to select a date any earlier than that allotted time frame, and remember, you should only be submitting locate requests for work that begins within, or that is intended to begin within 30 days. Next slide, please. So if you're submitting a request that will be for more than one civic address, or for a project that does not have a civic address associated, you will select Advanced Request when prompted as your first step. This also applies for work being done solely in the right-of-way or across multiple civic addresses, or for any work taking place within a new subdivision. Next slide, please. So one thing that is unique to the advanced requests is that you will be prompted to select a start date for each map selection you create. This is different from your work to begin date that will be auto-populated on the request. But now that advanced requests allow that 10 business day time frame, you will only be able to select a start date that is at least 10 business days in advance. So we can see on the screen here, this request was created on the 11th, so the start date allowed for this map selection would be the 25th of this case. Now this is done in step 2 while you're creating your map selection before you've entered any other information about your dig. Next slide, please. So along that same rule of that 10 business day time frame, the work to begin date on advanced requests also auto-populates to 10 business days in advance. So you can see that here as well. Same time frame from the 11th to the 25th. Next slide, please. Perfect. So When you're submitting locate requests, there is a chance that your request may be suspended for review by a customer support specialist at Ontario One Call. It is important that you are reviewing your request from top to bottom before you submit to avoid any further delays. Good locate requests are accurate, complete, and truthful. So if you're checking all of those boxes and reviewing your request before you hit submit, you're less likely to receive a suspended request. Now, if Ontario One Call discovers locates that are requested in the incorrect category, you may receive emails asking for clarification on the scope of your work as well. And make sure you're making changes to any suspended requests in a timely fashion so that your requests don't end up voided and you'll have to start over again. These deadlines and instructions are always included in your request for clarification emails, so please ensure you're reading those carefully and responding to them in due time. We're going to jump into the next slide, please there, Ryan, and we'll jump into a little bit of a workshop. All attendees should be able to view a poll as we go through these next few scenarios, and I'd like you to identify which type of request you believe these map selections should have been submitted as. These are actual map selections submitted by excavators over the last month or so. And all of the ones that I found were indeed submitted correctly, so that was great to see. But I'd like to see what your knowledge is like on this one. So we'll jump right into those scenarios now, and we'll take a look. Okay, so for scenario 1, we've got a sidewalk repair. Now, should this request be submitted as a single address request or an advanced request? Okay. Thank you everyone for your participation. We've got lots of answers in. I think, Ryan, we can reveal the answer on that one there. So this one is indeed an advanced request. The work on this example is stretching across multiple civics. You can click again there, Ryan, for me, please. Yeah, in the right-of-way and across multiple addresses for this one, so it certainly is an advanced request. Move on to scenario 2. So this one we have a map selection for an asphalt repair. Should this be submitted as a single address or an advanced request? Still seeing some answers come in there. Okay, you can click ahead there for me, Ryan. So if you answered single address, you are correct on this one. The work is being done only on one civic address, so you can submit this as such as a single address request. Move on to scenario number 3. Here we have a map selection made for trenching as a type of work. If you're unfamiliar with map selections, you'll see them on the aerial image here in a white shaded area with a dashed outline. Which type of request should this one be? We're looking at a single address or an advanced request. Okay, we're a little bit more split on this one than the last two, and that's okay. We can take a look at why this one is indeed an advanced request. So the zoom level included on this map selection, it almost looks like it could have been on a single civic, but in this case there was not actually a single civic or any civic address associated with the work taking place here, so it does go through as an advanced request. Thank you. Go to scenario 4. Okay, this one we've got for water service repair. Would this be a single address or an advanced request? A couple more responses trickling in here. Okay, we're very split on this one, and this was intentional as well, to try to get your brain working this morning on what this one should be, and it is indeed an advanced request. Now Now, while this water service may only be impacting a single civic address, the work, it does extend beyond the civic address into the right-of-way, which does meet the criteria for an advanced request, and that's how it should be submitted. Okay, we'll go the last one here for scenario 5. Map selection created here for a storm drain repair. Is this one a single address or an advanced request? Okay, leaning pretty heavily towards advanced request on this one, and that is correct. Again, with this one, there is not a civic address associated with the work, as it is entirely in the right-of-way, and would be processed as an advanced request. Well, thanks everybody for your participation. It's great to see that you are listening and taking the time to answer those polls, and thanks to Soleil for your support on that.
Thanks very much, Sarah. We would very much like your feedback if an interactive session is something that you'd like to see in the future. That was really great. Definitely a few things to think about, but glad to see that at least so far, we've had good compliance with submissions. So a couple more changes to talk about. Let's start with no charging for locates, because this was a big one. So this change came into effect on March 6th. Now, while this may have been an industry best practice prior to that date, today the Act expressly prohibits underground infrastructure owners from charging a fee for locates. Now, previously, the Act only prohibited Ontario One Call from charging a person submitting a locate request, but didn't explicitly authorize or frankly prohibit an underground infrastructure owner from charging a fee for delivering locates. So also bear in mind that what's prohibited in this section is any locate fees in disguise. So billing an administrative fee or a fee to provide a relocate would also be prohibited under this section. And excavator recourse was something that we spent a lot of time talking about, but it is a change that we wanted to talk about today because it has impacted the sector. So yeah, another recent change is an amendment to the Act that removed an excavator's opportunity to seek compensation from a member through the Ontario Land Tribunal where a member failed to provide a locate on time. Something that maybe isn't as well understood is that, we'd like for you to remember that this doesn't mean that excavators can't seek recourse. It just means that these matters won't be heard before the Ontario Land Tribunal or OLT. Now, the remainder of the recourse provision remains in force, which means excavators can seek compensation from underground infrastructure owners through the OLT, where a member fails to provide an accurate locate, falsely clears a request, and where a member fails to provide information or provides or to provide accurate information to a dedicated locator. Administrative penalties have received, I think, I want to say the most airtime in our compliance communications over the last year because it's been such a big change to our governance. Well, now that Ontario One Call has issued its first administrative penalty with others at various stages, other potential administrative penalties at various stages in our process, I thought it was worthwhile to review the myths and facts that we shared about administrative penalties in our previous webinar. And just a reminder that the webinar is available on our Ontario One Call YouTube channel. It's a great resource for a deep dive into our current thinking, into the implementation of the new regulation that came into force on May 1st. That webinar still rings true today. It's still our current thinking on administrative penalties. So let's talk about some myths and facts when it comes to APs. So the first myth is that absolute liability means Ontario One Call assesses millions of dollars in late locate penalties. No. There are no automatic APs in our Ontario One Call compliance process. Now, while data is an important indicator, and important evidence that may be used to trigger an investigation, no APs will be issued on the basis of data alone. That an investigation is always required in our new process. And in year one, we are focusing on complaints received by the CAPE team and relying less so on data. The next myth, Ontario One Call plans to use AP monies it collects to fund its operations and payroll. That could not be further from the truth. The fact is that the regulation has strict rules about how Ontario One Call can use its funds, the funds that it collects through the issuance of administrative penalties, and these funds can't be used to pay for Ontario One Call's payroll or operations. What can it be used for? Well, according to the regulation, we can use the funds that we collect to pay for research, studies, analyses, consultations, as well as offsetting the legal fees that we incur by defending our administrative penalties in tribunal. Now, that's not a complete list. For a full list of what Ontario One Call can spend its monies on, the administrative penalty monies collected, please see the administrative penalty regulation itself, which is linked on our website. And then finally, something that we have heard less and less since May 1st, but is still something that we're hearing, is that Ontario One Call will retroactively issue administrative penalties for poor performance in 2024. And no, the fact is that Ontario One Call's assessors, while we will take past performance into consideration, no penalties will be issued retroactively. Now, with that, I'd like to welcome Ian Simpson to the webinar. Now, Ian knows a thing or two about compliance just based on his history here at Ontario One Call. Welcome, Ian. Eager to learn a few things about imminent changes to our governance.
Thank you so much, Ryan. And hi, everybody. I'm very excited to be here today and see everyone. Well, talk to everyone anyway. Also happy to answer some questions on any changes that have come up. So today I'm going to talk about some changes to some very important documents that help stakeholders understand what their obligations are legally and how to operate compliantly within our system. And those are our rules document and policies, compliance policy documents. There's 3 documents I'm going to talk about today. If we just go to the next slide, I'll highlight them. So why am I talking about them and why are they updated? So as it's been indicated throughout this entire presentation, which I think the CAPE team has done a great job with. Actually, can we just go? Yeah, CAPE team has done a great job with, as well as Sarah walking you through scenarios, is there's been changes to our legislation and there's been changes to our regulations. And every time that happens, Ontario One Call has to go through all of its governance documents, including our bylaws, as well as these documents I'm about to talk about, which are our rules documents and our policies for stakeholders to help them maintain compliance. So bylaws happen, they get voted on by our infrastructure owners at our upcoming annual meeting. So we'll talk about that through consultations over the while. But these documents have already been updated based on what we've had to do based on legal changes in our legislation as well as the regulations, and have been approved by the board and will be published to our website very soon, within the next week. So you're getting a sneak peek at these, which is great. So what are these documents? Why am I talking about it? So first is the rules document. So what is the rules document and why would anyone care? So it's a really good document. It's a document that is a plain language document that is meant for underground infrastructure owners and excavators, that combines all of their legal obligations into one document so it's easy to read. And then through that document, I can understand how to operate within the legal framework to stay compliant, as well as understand the compliance process in case you find yourself in any compliance investigations or complaints process, and how to go about that. So that's the rules document. Then we have 2 policies that have been updated too. One is the administrative penalty policy. So that policy is basically only revolving around administrative penalties. So if you find yourself ever receiving an administrative penalty, this document is your how-to guide to understand what your rights are, how APs are applied, as well as how to dispute them through an appeals process. And it goes through all the timelines in there for you. So it's your rights document, if you think about it that way. And then the dispute resolution policy is for basically similar document to the administrative penalties, but it deals with any other compliance action or enforcement that you may find yourself in. And if you want to dispute a decision, these are your rights and all the timelines that you have to follow in order to dispute something if you want to. So then we'll go through each document just very quickly, high level here, so you can understand what's been changed. Now, again, all these documents have been changed because of legislation changes as well as regulation changes, but I'll just highlight a few. So if we just go to the next slide there, Ryan. So this just goes through, so legislation changes, regulations, as well as we review those documents with board approval, there's just been some looking at best practices and clarity, trying to clarify some terms just to make it easier to read. So there's been some updates with that as well. The next slide will go into the changes to the rules document. So again, this rules document is your how-to guide to stay compliant and follows through the compliance process for you. So what's changed? Well, in the Act itself, there was a couple things that changed. So the rules document had to be edited for these things. One is the fees section, which is in the rules, has been updated because the Act now reflects that all infrastructure owners must pay Ontario One Call Forward services. So that's been simplified just to basically state that. There's another section in there around dedicated locator fees through Ontario One Call, our administration fees. That is now in the Act as well. So it just tells people that, you know, if you're using that service, you have to pay fees, and it tells you where to find those fees as well within our system. And then one other aspect within the rules, it explains all the different types of compliance action that the compliance team can take. And one of those actions is the possibility of prosecution. So prosecution has been added to the list of all the different types of compliance action that the compliance team can take. And those were the updates for the Act. Now, when it comes to the regulations, it comes down to basically everything that Sarah was walking you through with the advanced requests. So advanced requests are specified requests, right, for large excavations and digs. So there's just been some updates on the language around that so everyone can understand the timelines and how to go about requesting that locate request. And then just to help stakeholders understand some things and get some more clarity, the document was looked through to help define terms that maybe weren't defined previously but are used quite a bit. As well as just look at some language and formatting to make it easier to read. So definitions on legal things like our agreement with our ministry, the Ministry of Public and Business Services Delivery. Our agreement with them and their oversight is called the Memorandum of Understanding, MOU. So there's a definition there so that everyone understands our governance framework. Specified locate requests, which is now in the Act, in the Act as well as in the regulation, as well as other common terms like abandoned infrastructure. We've used the term advanced request quite a few times today. So there's a definition in there so everyone can understand. There's also just a small little section in there talking about member offboarding. So if a member, which is an underground infrastructure owner, no longer owns infrastructure, just so they're not notified and no longer legally obligated under a system, there's just a section in there that states that you have to be offboarded so you don't receive locate requests anymore. And then lastly, just for best practices, we just wanted to make sure that everyone knew if they were reading just the rules document that the administrative penalty policy with the right to appeal was in this document, so you knew where to find that document. And then I'll just go over the policies as well. So that's the rules document. I highly recommend that the stakeholders do keep this document in their back pocket. It is on our governance website, important documents that can be found. Again, the updated version will be there in about a week's time. So we will send out communications about that. Now for the administrative penalty policy, just quickly, just updating that if you do receive an administrative penalty, you have to, by law, pay for that penalty. That is language in the Act, so we want to make sure it was in there. And then with the change to the regulation on specified requests, so administrative penalty, there's now an administrative penalty if someone is late in providing a specified, an infrastructure owner doing a late locate, it's the same penalty as if you were standard locate. Now it's also for specified. That's just been added as well. And then, so that's pretty much all for the administrative penalty policy. And then the dispute resolution policy, really quickly, didn't change much at all. We just looked over the document with legal counsel as well as the board, and we're just looking at formatting to make it easier to read. The only change was the timelines that are in there. We just wanted to make sure it was really clear. The timelines didn't change at all, just made it really clear so that you, knowing your rights, could understand the timeframes to when to make disputes if you find yourself in compliance enforcement. And that's my update today on these. Happy to answer any questions, of course. Look out for our communications on it. We will send out communications about when these documents are published for everyone to take a look at. Thank you, Ryan.
Ian, thank you for that. I think that I'll ask you to stick around for our Q&A that's up next, hosted by Soleil. We felt it was important to do this webinar because there have been a number of changes, but there have been a lot of changes in our governance. And so just spending the last 45 minutes talking about and reviewing those, really worthwhile to have today's webinar. What I would say, though, is that please let us know if there's anything that you would like us to take more time in. We are always looking for or more time in addressing. We're always looking for topics for our future webinars, as well as some of our comms products and our other outreach. So please do let us know if you'd like to learn more about anything that we mentioned today or something else. And we're happy to do that. So
Ryan, sorry,
yes.
Before we go into questions,
Yes.
I just would like to let everyone know that if you would like to learn more about compliance, recent changes, and just hear more about from the compliance team, you guys will have another session in person at our conference and trade show on September 9 and 8th at the Woodbine Banquet Hall in Toronto. I'm putting the link in the Q&A section for everybody to just review the program and our wonderful speakers. We will not just be talking about compliance. We will be talking about DL, digital roadmaps. So we will have an international panel from one call centers coming in from different provinces in Canada and states in the US. There will be plenty of networking opportunities, so please check it out, and hopefully we'll see you there. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right. So with that, I have several questions, and I'll start with the first one that I have, which I think is best answered by Corey. Will Ontario One Call consider making locate status non-compliant / no response simply non-compliant?
So the non-compliant no response column in the performance data will remain separate from non-compliant and it'll remain as is. So this data helps Ontario One Call and underground infrastructure owners know which locates have not been updated in 360 feedback. So it's an important tool and data set within the performance reports. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Corey. This question is for Ryan. Will Ontario One Call compliance regard all utilities as late or consider issuing a fine to a utility if it has been documented that another utility has held up the completion of a locate in its entirety? If yes, in the name of compliance, would you suggest that each utility be marked as closed and it is completed even though the contractor cannot move forward with an incomplete locate package?
Thank you for the question, Soleil. I was glad to hear this, or I was glad to see this question submitted before the webinar, because I've often heard that it's the most late locate that is subject to administrative penalties. So it was a great question to ask to add clarification to, because while it may be true that the most late locate is could be subject to disciplinary action up to and including administrative penalties, that's true for any late locate. So even if you are 1 day less late, but late nonetheless, so beyond the statutory timelines, then that locate, that infrastructure owner could be subject to administrative penalties or other outcomes under our governance. The question about 360 is so part B to that question is an important one because 360 must always be completed once a locate is completed or once there's a clear within 3 business days. So it doesn't matter if there are other outstanding locates. What matters is as a package that locate requirement is completed. So long story short, any late locate could be subject to administrative penalties or other outcomes, and 360 must always be completed when a locate is complete, regardless of the status of other locates.
All right, thank you so much for that. My next question is for either Ian or Sarah here. Will there be enhancements to the communication plan from Ontario OneCall to update members on the portal changes as they take effect?
Yeah, sure. I'll take that one.
Okay, go ahead.
For sure. Yeah, 100%. So as any improvements happen through the system in order to help with user experiences and basically helping our stakeholders, we will send out communications so people understand what those changes are. And you may find some involvement with the education department too, hosting webinars, going out doing speaking events as well, just so there's a greater not just a communication, but also a hands-on experience, kind of like the workshop that Sarah did today. So definitely we'll communicate that out.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I have a question for Corey. In addition to what is currently provided in the how-to guides that accompany the Locate Performance Report, is Ontario OneCall considering adding details on what to exclude once you have run your own reporting?
So on each page of the performance reports that the underground infrastructure owners receive, from Ontario OneCall, there's a disclaimer somewhere on those pages. Each report's different, so I don't want to say a specific location, but somewhere within each page, there's a disclaimer that says what locate requests are excluded from the report. So the majority of the ones that compliance sent, the exclusions would be planning requests, sewer lateral, emergencies, cancels, tests, and voids. Previously and actually currently, priority 0 requests are excluded, but we're currently working with the reporting team to include that data in the very near future.
All right, perfect. Well, that answers my next question as well. So we'll just move right along.
Well, Salai, if I could, because communication's important, I just wanted to tag on to Corey's answer, just by saying that when that change happens, we will communicate that ahead of time because we know that the reports are a really useful tool. I know that our infrastructure owners and sometimes locate service providers on their behalf use these data as an audit function, as an assurance function. So when that changes, we'll be sure to communicate that so no one's caught off guard.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that addition, Ryan. I have a question for Sarah here. When putting in a locate request, what will guarantee that it designates as a standard locate so that responses are required within 5 business days? Some parts of large industrial sites don't have civic numbers, and the civic numbers seem to affect the intersecting streets that are allowed. The result is that we must often enter the information that either makes no sense or admit the civic number in order to get a request in. Often these submissions end up getting 10 business day response times and not 5.
Okay, thank you for the question, Soleil. So the way to guarantee that you're getting a standard locate request is to submit it that way. Like we reviewed in the workshop, selecting either a single address or an advanced request is the first step when you're processing a locate request online. But it is important that you're only submitting single address request for those that meet the criteria. So if you're working in areas that are large industrial sites or areas that don't have a civic address associated, you must submit those as an advanced locate request. If you are having difficulty getting the right intersecting streets selected, you do have the option to manually modify those entries before submitting a request to ensure that it best reflects your work area.
Perfect. Thank you so much. For Corey, I have, is Ontario One Call considering making a distinction between standard and project on their locate performance reports?
Yes, great question. So the amazing reporting team at Ontario One Call is finalizing the development of the performance reports for May 2024 and onward to include single address and advance request data where infrastructure owners will be able to see that distinction. It's still in development and the team is looking at a couple of options on how to display that data. But due to the timeline of the advance requests being required with the new timeline, the May 2024 reporting data may be, actually not maybe, it will be delayed and released later than usual.
Okay.
So, I wonder if we can take one more question, just being respectful of time of everyone's time today, and
Yeah,
then we'll move to wrap.
All right. So I just have one question left, actually. It's for Sarah. Is there a way to check to see if a request will get suspended before attempting to submit the request? This would give users the ability to learn how to avoid suspensions, and it would also save Ontario One Call effort and speed up the process.
Thank you. That's a great question. So the system will only allow you to know whether your request has been suspended after you've hit submit, after it can review all of the information that you've submitted to compare it with our mapping information and things like that. So it is important that you review your request before you hit submit, and the web portal will always prompt you to do this. It'll display your entire locate request as you've submitted it before you actually finally select submit. So you can do that check and balance to make sure the information that you've submitted is accurate, complete, and truthful. And that's going to be your best defense against avoiding a suspended request. It's important to note, though, that it's not guaranteed to avoid a suspended request, as there is a small number of requests that are suspended at random for our teams to audit from time to time. But if you're having difficulty with locate requests suspending more often than they should, I highly encourage you to enroll in our professional locate administrator course. This will give you the fundamental skills of building and managing your locate requests so that you can avoid those delays in the future as well. And if any specific issues, they can always reach out to the training team as well.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So just as we close, I'd like to thank Valentina for hosting today's session, and to our esteemed panel. There was a lot of information shared today, and I'm sure the sector is grateful. I am grateful. Please bear in mind that if you have any additional questions, you are welcome to pose those questions to Ontario One Call's CAPE team, and we will respond to every single question that we receive. Thank you, everyone, for your time, and have a great rest of your day. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Thank you.